Okay. So welcome to the second week of this course on combinatorics. And previous week we looked at the Pegian-Hall principle and some related questions. This week we are going to look at some basic counting techniques, which will be useful for developing new techniques as well as for any question that you might look at combinatorics. Any of these questions will most of the time need some of these basic techniques and their understanding. So we are going to start with a simple question, and then we try to see how to develop this into a technique, and then that is the idea. Okay. So here is the question that a number of monkeys jumped across a small river from tree A to tree B. Okay, so we have these two trees, let us say A and B, and then the monkeys jumped from one tree to the other. Now, when they were jumping, 10 of the monkeys fell down to the river, and then they got wet, and then they swam across. What we know further is that the remaining 15 monkeys did not get wet. Now the question asks us to find what is the total number of monkeys that jumped. Okay. Now this is a very easy question, right? Any student of mathematics should immediately be able to tell that since we have 10 monkeys who fell to the river and 15 who did not, we have 10 plus 15, right, which is equal to 25, right? So 25 monkeys basically jumped from river, one of the tree to the other on the river side. Right? That is the answer that we all know. Okay. Now, let us look at a slightly different question. A number of friends went for a trip somewhere. Okay. Now, when they came back, 8 of them wore blue t-shirts and 11 of them wore red t-shirts. Now the question is that how many went for the trip? Now, is it possible to answer that this is 11 plus 8 is equal to 19? Well, in fact, no, right? Because what we know is that there were 8 people wearing blue t-shirts and 11 wearing red t-shirts. So we definitely know that there were at least 11 plus 8, 19 people who went for the trip. But the question doesn't say anything about other people who might be wearing let's say yellow or green or other shirts, right? So the question doesn't list exhaustively, right, all the people who went for the trip, and therefore we really don't know whether we have more than 19 or not. So we cannot really answer it except saying that okay, there were at least 19. Now let us look at a slightly more different question. So we have a few classmates who went for a mountain climbing, right? Another trip. 6 of them had shoes, right? They were wearing shoes, and 7 of them had walking sticks with them, while 3 were barefoot. Right now, how many went for the trip? So here there are two problems, right? We don't know whether the question is exhaustive, whether it covers all the people. But even if let's say that suppose we are given that the remaining 3 people were barefoot, we still don't know. Maybe the 7 of them who were having walking stick where precisely those having shoes and who are barefoot, or maybe some of them had something else like boots or something, right? So this question does not say whether there could be intersections between these people, or like whether there is some other thing. They were separate, at least 7 people, right? So these questions we don't know. So therefore, we cannot really answer anything about this. So these three tells us something, right? In the first question, we were able to answer precisely because we knew that both the sets were disjoint and they were exhaustive, right? So if we are given that if A and B are disjoint sets, and then their union, we can say, has cardinality equal to the sum of the cardinalities of each of them, right? So this is called the addition principle. So if we want to use addition to count things, then we can use this principle, but we require that they to be disjoint, right? So if A and B are disjoint, then we can find the cardinality of A union B is equal to cardinality of A plus cardinality of B. On the other hand, if you have more, we can still we can still use this, but we need the pairwise disjoint condition to be able to use this. So suppose we have A1 to AK are pairwise disjoint sets, then the union has cardinality equal to the sum of the cardinalities of the individual sets. But it is important to note that we were clearly saying that A1 to AK are pairwise disjoint, right? It is not sufficient to say that, let's say that there are A1, A2 and A3, and A1 intersection A2 intersection A3 is empty, right? So A1 intersection A2 intersection empty says that A1, A2, A3 are all together disjoint, right? They don't have a common element. But it does not say that A1 intersection A2 is is empty, and A1 intersection A3 is empty, and A2 intersection A3 is empty. So this is required to be able to use the addition principle. So we have a pairwise disjoint sets, then we can also count. So this is the generalization of the addition principle. Okay. Now, so here is a subtraction principle. Okay. So what is the subtraction principle? It says that if A is a finite set and B is subset of A, then cardinality of A minus B is equal to cardinality of A minus cardinality of B. So earlier we were looking at when we can add. Now we are asking when we can subtract. Okay. So we are saying that if B is subset of A, then we can find the cardinality of A minus B by looking at A minus B, cardinality of A minus cardinality of B. But B is subset of A is very important. If B is not subset of A, this principle cannot be directly applied. So here is an example. Let us say count the number of positive integers with at most 4 digits that have at least 2 different digits. So we want to count the number of positive integers with at most 4 digits that have at least 2 different digits. Now one can directly count this. Okay, I recommend that you spend some time finding out how to directly count this, right, rather than using the subtraction principle, and then see why it is going to be better to use subtraction principle here. Okay. So how do we use the subtraction principle? So what are we given? We are given that we have the set of positive integers with at most 4 digits. That is what we are looking at, right? With some extra properties. So we can consider your big set as the set of all positive integers with at most 4 digits. How many are there? Well, we know that the smallest number with 5 digits is 10,000. So therefore, up to 9999, right? 9,999. we have integers, and they have cardinality exactly. I think I made the wrong tool. So like 1, 2, etc. Let's say 9, 9, 9, 9, right? And this set has cardinality is equal to 9, 9, 9, 9, right? So we have this many elements in our big set. Now we want to be able to find another set B with the property that if you subtract cardinality of B, we get what we want, right? We want to find out the sets. We want to find out the number of elements that have at least 2 different digits. Now, so the natural set that we can look at is all those integers with at most 4 digits, but having only one. There is no 2 distinct digits, right? So exactly the same digit is repeated for all these numbers. Now this is very easy to count, right? So what is B consisting of? It has all the numbers 1 to 9, right? 1, 2, etc. 9. Then it has 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, etc. Right? Again, there are 9 of them, 99. Then you can have 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, etc. up to 999. Similarly, 1111, etc. 9999, right? These are precisely those with 111, 222, etc. Right? Not all the numbers in between, right? So here we have exactly 9. Here exactly 9. Here exactly 9. And here also exactly 9. So this says that we have exactly 36 elements in B, right? So 36 numbers has this property that it uses only one digit, right? I mean repeatedly, but only one distinct digit is appearing. I mean a unique digit is appearing. So therefore, we can find out the cardinality of A minus B, which says, right? So A minus B is the set of numbers with the property that we were looking at, right? Less than 9999, less than 10,000, and having at least 2 different digits. So what is this? This is 9999 minus 36, right? Again, wrong tool, sorry. 9999 minus 36. And what is this number? Whatever it is, 63, right? 9963. Fine. So we use subtraction principle to count this. But again, you can verify that if you can count without using subtraction principle directly, and maybe you can see that like this is much more efficient way to do the counting. Okay. So now, as I told you, we want the condition that B is subset of A to be able to use the subtraction principle. So I want you to come up with some examples that illustrate that B subset A is necessary, right? Otherwise, the counting will go wrong. So come up with some examples. It's very easy to come up with, but still think about it. Come up with a couple of different examples. Okay? So this is a homework. Now, let us look at another problem. So we already studied 2 different principles, right? Addition principle and subtraction principle. Now let us look at another problem. So count the number of binary strings of length k. So binary strings are the strings that we create with just zeros and ones, right? So example is like 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, right? Or 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, right? So all these are binary strings. Now we want to look at strings of length exactly k. How many are there? Now how do you count something like this, right? So you can try to find out like for like 1, for example 2, right? So for 1, if the length is exactly 1, we have either 0 or 1, right? There are two possibilities, and that is it. If you are looking at length 2, then you have 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 1, right? There are 4 of them. Right? Now, once you do this, we can try to, like come up with a, an idea and then try to use some method like induction or something to prove this. That is one possibility. Now let us look at another way to look at this. So what we know is that we are going to look at strings of length exactly k, right? So we have a string of length k, means that there are k positions, right? Position 1, position 2, position 3, etc. Position k. So we have strings with k positions. Now, if you look at any position, what are the possible letters of that can appear here? Either 0 or 1, right? So at each position we have only the possibility to write either 0 or 1, right? 0 or 1, right? 0 or 1, 0 or 1, right? So every position has exactly these two possibilities. Now I can put 0 or 1 at the first place, and without worrying about what happened in there, I can put 0 or 1 at the second place, one of them, right? Exactly one of them I can put at each of the k different places. So this says that I have exactly two choices, right? Two possibilities for the first position, 0 or 1, exactly two possibilities for the second position. And the first position, whichever I choose, I can still choose the second position without worrying about what happened there. So they are basically independent. So I can decide this independently, right? Like what to write here. So therefore, what we know is that if I have two choices here and two choices there, then I have 2 into 2, 4 possible choices for the strings of length 2, right? So I can basically multiply the choices available at the position 1, position 2, etc., position k, and multiply them together to get the number of strings. So the number of strings of length k is going to be 2 into 2 into 2 into 2, etc., up to k times. So that is 2 raised to k. So we immediately get that the number of binary strings of length k is equal to 2 raised to k. So now let us look at another question. We want to find the number of 4-digit numbers starting and ending with an even digit. Okay. So how will you calculate this? Again, I want you to pause the video and think about it for a few minutes if you want. Right? Maybe you can get it immediately, but think about it and then find your own answer. And then if then you proceed, right? So how do we do this? So we have 4-digit numbers, and then it can start and end with even digit. So this puts some restrictions on what are the possible numbers that you can use, right? For example, if you are looking at the first position, right? The first position, can you use, let us say, right? Let us say that you are using the 4 positions are here, right? Now, in the first position, can you use like you are only allowed to use even digits. So therefore, what are the even digits? Like 0, 2, 4, 6, and 8, right? But 0 cannot be used in the first digit because we are talking about numbers. It's not string, right? So therefore, we are not allowed to use 0. So we can use 2, 2, 4, 6, 8, right? Any of these numbers we can use here. Now, it should start and end with even digits, but that doesn't say that the middle digits can be anything, right? So middle digits can be any of the possible numbers 0 to 9, right? So therefore, there are 10 possible choices here, right? Similarly, third digit can also be any of the 10 possible digits. What about the last digit? It must be an even digit. So what are the possibilities? 2, 4, 6, 8. But here we also can have 0. So there are 5 choices here, 4 choices here. But now these can be independent, right? No matter what I choose at the first place, I can choose any of the 10 digits in the second place. So I have 4 choices here, and independently I have 10 choices here. So 4 into 10. Similarly, another independent 10 choices here. I have another into 10 and into 5. So therefore I have total number of choices is 4 into 10 into 10 into 5, which is equal to 2000, right? So we have exactly 2000 numbers with this property. Okay. Now, this tells us a general principle which we call the product rule or fundamental counting principle. So what does this exactly state? So we can state the fundamental counting principle as follows. So consider a finite sequence of decisions. Okay. So sequence means that, in the first time you make a decision, then there is another place where you can make another decision, right? This way. So consider a finite sequence of decisions, and suppose that the number of choices for each separate decision is independent of the previously made decisions. Okay. So the decisions are made in some sequence, and I make the first decision, then second decision. And when I take the third decision, I want to make sure that all the previous decisions does not affect the choices here. Right? So the choices are independent of the previous decisions. Then the total number of ways to choose the sequence of decisions is the product of the number of choices at each stage. So we have a finite sequence of decisions, and the choices, the number of choices for each separate decision is independent of the previously made decisions. Then the total number of ways to choose the sequence of all the decisions, right, is the product of the number of choices at each stage. So this is the product rule. Now we already saw 2 applications of product rule, but let us look at a few more, because it's a very, very important rule, and we will need lots of applications of this in the following days. So here is another example, right? Find the number of positive integer factors of 1500. Okay. So how can you use product rule to find out the number of factors of a number given like 1500 here? So again, try to work it out yourself. Stop the video, watch, and then get back. So how are you going to do this? Now, what we know about 1500? 1500, I can write it as 3 into, right, 5 raised to, so how many, so I basically I look at the prime factors, right? So I know that there is 5 appearing 3 times, right? 5 raised to 3. And then how many times 2 is appearing? 2 raised to, let us say, 4 times, right? Is it correct? 3 into 5, 15. Then I have 25 into 4, which is 100. Then another no, 2 raised to 2. Okay. So 2 raised to, how many are there? Not 4, right? Where is the eraser? Right? How many are there? 2 raised to 2, right? So 25 into 4, which is 100, and then 3 into 5, 50, right? So 3 into 5 raised to 3 into 2 raised to 2, right? So this is the prime factorization of 1500. Now, how can you use the prime factorization now to find the number of positive integer factors. So if you look at any factor, we know that the factor is basically a product of the possible subset of the prime factors, right? So therefore we can just look at how many such possibilities are there, right? So since 3 is appearing only once, my choice is to have either 3 to appear in the factor or not, right? So the power of 3 in the factor can be 0 or 1, right? So I can have 3 raised to 0 or 3 raised to 1, right, as the possible factors. Similarly, I can have 5 raised to 0, 5 raised to 1, 5 raised to 2, and 5 raised to 3, right? There are 4 possible choices for 5, right? And then I have 3 possible choices for 2, right? 0, 1, or 2. So therefore, what can I say? I can say that, like, if this number is given, then I can find out there is a 2 into 4 into 3, right, which is 24 possible factors. So these are the number of possible integer positive integer factors of 1500. So here again we use the product rule, right, because the choices were independent, right? The 3, I'm choosing 3 to be one of the factors or not is independent of my second choice, right? How many 5s I am going to take, or how many 2s I am going to take. So therefore I can use this. So I get the answer 24. Now another question. Okay, another example. So I have 10 people who reach simultaneously at a museum, and museum allows passes, so they all came with passes. Okay, so you can use the pass to visit regularly, maybe once in in a month you want to go a couple of times, you can use the pass to go. So one day in the morning, like when the museum opens, 10 people stand in the front of the museum, and then they all reached at the same time. Okay, so basically when they wanted to enter, so the ticket checker said that, okay, I cannot put everybody together, I want to check passer, so please form a queue, right? So stand in a line and then come inside, right? Now since all of them came together, they can queue in any way they want, right? If some person reached first, then you can say that, okay, because he reached first, he stands in the front. But now here everybody came together, so any order they are going to stand is not going to make a difference. So the question is that how many different ways this queuing can be done. So how will you count this, right? Now if you look at this question, there is see, so we can say that, okay, let us look at the let us look at the first person who is going to be in the line, right? The first person going to be in the line can be any of the 10 persons, right? So I can choose the first person who is going to stand in any of the 10 possible ways. But now when I look at the second person who is going to stand in the line, that is going to depend on who was in the first, right? The choice of the person who is going to stand second is going to be dependent on the who was standing in the first position, right? Because if so A, B, C, D, etc. are the people, if A is standing in the first position, then A cannot stand in the second position, right? But if B was standing in the first position, right, out of this 10 we choose B to be in the first position, then B cannot stand in the second position, so it can be only any of the other guys, right? So the choices themselves are not independent, right? But the number of choices, on the other hand, one can show that it is independent. So the framing of the product rule is careful, right? So it says that if the number of choices of each separate decision is independent of previously made decision, So the choices themselves need not be independent, right? So that is important, right? So the first in line, we have 10 possible choices for that guy or that person, right? That girl. So whoever arranged there, one of these 10 persons must stand in the queue. But once a person is decided, the second position can be filled with any of the 9 possible remaining guys. Even though who is going to stand there is dependent on the first choice, the number of persons who is going to stand there does not depend on this choice. So therefore, I can clearly say there are 9 possible other guys standing for the second position. Then I can choose the third guy in 8 possible ways, etc. The last guy is going to be only one guy, right? He is going to stand in the 10th position. So we already said that even though the choices are not independent, the number of choices at each stage were independent. So therefore, I can now take the product. So I can multiply 10 into 9 into 8 into etc. into 1, right? So therefore, the total number of ways to form Q is 10 into 9 into etc. 2 into 1, right? This particular number has so much applications and it comes in so many places in any of the counting questions that it has a special name. It's called factorial. You might already have seen this, right? And it's denoted by 10 factorial in this case, or n factorial if you are looking at n in general. So this particular symbol, exclamation mark. So this is the this is how we. Why is it not coming? This is how we denote. Okay. So fine. Now another example. Okay. So I'm looking at too many examples maybe, but these examples are also telling some other questions that come, some parameters that comes very often. So that might be also useful. So let S be a set which has n elements. Okay. Now a k permutation of the set S are the ordered k element subsets of S. Okay. So I can just take the k element subsets of the set and then order them, right? So we start with a set, take some number of elements from them, put some in any order that I want. Now the question is that how many k permutations of S are there? Now, how do you count this? Well, from the previous question that we looked, we might have a good idea about it, right? So I start with a set S which has exactly n elements. Now I want to form a k permutation, means that I need to order these k elements in whichever k elements I am going to have in a particular manner, right? So I fix, let's say, k positions and then say that okay, the first position I am going to choose, right? So 1, 2, 3, etc. K, right? Now first position I want to fill up with some element, right? So I can choose one of the elements. There are how many choices? There are n possibilities, right? N possibilities for the first position, because any of the n elements can be selected here. But then the second position, the first person whoever I choose cannot be there. So therefore, the remaining n minus guys, one of them can be chosen here. Then n minus 2, and then up to n minus k plus 1, right? So if there are k element subset that we are forming, not subset, like permutation that we are forming, then we can choose n persons for the first position, n minus 1 for the second, etc., n minus k plus 1. And each of these choices are independent, so therefore it is n into n minus 1 into etc., n minus k plus 1, right? Yeah. So this particular thing has a special notation. This is denoted by this n within brackets and then k outside, right, as a subscript. So this is something, yeah, something you a notation that will come again, and it's also denoted sometimes as npk or p of n comma k. So all these notations are used, but we will stick with one of them as far as we can. But sometimes many textbooks follow many different notations, and sometimes we might just use one of these. Anyway, it's better to be familiar with this. So this is the number of permutations, k permutations of a set. Now if k is equal to n, right, so we are looking at n minus 1, n minus 2, etc., n minus k plus 1. Now when k is equal to 1, you can see that this immediately reduces to n factorial, right? This is what we get, right? So and it also makes sense because we are talking about k permutations. Now what we looked at earlier was basically an n permutation of the n set, right? Because we are looking at all possible arrangements. This is precisely what we looked at in the previous question, where we are looking at the number of ways to queue up the 10 people, right? So the 10 factorial came because they were all the permutations of the people, right? We were arranging them in a linear order. So the linear arrangements of these objects can also be called as permutations of them. Okay. So, so our observation is that n choose k is n factorial by n minus k factorial, because by definition, whatever n minus k factorial is 1, 2, etc., up to n minus k, their product, and n factorial it is 1, 2, etc., n, but in the npk we have only n into n minus 1, etc., n minus k plus 1. So the 1 to n minus k is missing, so that I can just divide, right, from the whole product. So therefore npk is n factorial by n minus k factorial. Okay, yet another example. I think we are looking at many examples. So what we have here, so I have two rooms. Okay, so one room has m people standing inside that room, and the next room has n persons standing there. Okay. Now I ask the question, how many different ways are there for me to ask the people in the first room to queue up, and also at the same time in the second room to queue up, right? So I want the persons in the first room to queue up, and at the same time I want the persons in the second room also to queue up. How many ways we can do? So we already saw that if you have m persons and you want to queue them up, then I can do this in m factorial possible ways, right? M factorial ways I can do this. In the second room, there are n people, so I can permute them in any of the n factorial ways to queue them up. But these two I can do independently, because the persons in the first room are queued up and the persons in the second room are queued up separately. So therefore, there is m factorial into n factorial ways. So the total number of ways to queue up them separately is m factorial into n factorial. Now comes the question, what happens if m is equal to 0? If m is equal to 0, I can still arrange the persons in the second room to queue up in n factorial ways, right? So when I say that people in the first room to be queued up in whatever ways they can, and the second room to be queued up in whatever ways they can, I still want the answer that the n factorial guys who are going to be permitted in the second room are all possible different arrangements of them, right? So I want m factorial times n factorial to be the answer for this, but then I want to get n factorial as the answer because that is the number of ways to arrange the people in the second room. So therefore m factorial in the first case when m is equal to 0 must be 1, right? Because otherwise 1 into n factorial, 0 into n factorial will not be n factorial, right? I want n factorial into something to be n factorial itself. So therefore m factorial in that case must be also 1. So therefore we justify the reason we use 0 factorial is equal to 1. Okay. So the factorial we define by taking product from starting from the number -1 etc. when till we reach 1, right, for the integer, positive integer. On the other hand, when it is equal to 0, what is the number? So we can justify using it to be 1. In fact, there will be several other occasions we will see that why it is required to define it this way. But now you have at least some reason to see why. Okay. Now here is a question. A manufacturer uses, let us say, serial numbers of the following form, right? So every product that he makes, he puts some serial number, right? Maybe using for warranty purposes, etc. Now, two uppercase letters followed by 5 digits, and then they are followed by the letters capital M and G or capital M and K. Then this can be followed by MG and MK, followed by again 3 digits and one uppercase letter. Okay. So the serial number has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 letters or digits appearing in the form, right? Now, how many possible serial numbers he has at his disposal, right? So he makes these products, every day, maybe thousands of them. Now the question is that totally how many serial numbers he has at his hand, right? Because after some time, if it's a finite number, so after some time it might repeat. So till then, when he can do this, right? Produce many numbers of this form. So this is very easy to compute. I want you to think about this and work it out yourself. Maybe that is a better way. Now, another question. Count the odd numbers with the distinct digits between 1000 and 9999. This is a question I want to discuss because of some interesting facts. But before I discuss, please stop the video and look at this question, think about it, and try to come up with your own answer and see whether it matches with our computation. Okay, so how are you going to count this? So here is how I am going to do it. Okay, so I know that I am looking at odd numbers with the distinct digits between 1000 and 999. So I know that all these numbers has exactly 4 digits, right? So I have 4 possible. This is the wrong tool again. Yes, it has exactly 4 digits, right? Now, since I know that the number is odd, I know that the last digit is going to be either 1, 3, 5, or 7, right? Or 9, of course, yeah. So the last digit has the possibilities 1, 3, 5, 7, or 9. So there are 5 possible choices for the last digit, right? 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, right? Now, the first digit, what is the choice I have for the first digit? The first digit cannot be 0, right? It cannot be 0. Now, it cannot be the digit I chose for the last digit because it needs distinct digits. So therefore, I have 8 possibilities here, right? So other than the first one I chose, I can choose any of the remaining 8, right? So I have 1 to 9. Out of this 9, I cannot choose the one I chose for the uh, uh, position here. So therefore, I have remaining 8 choices. Now, to select the second digit, how many ways I can? Second digit can be any of the 0 to 9, the 10 digits, but I cannot have the first digit as well as the last digit, right? So therefore, 8 choices are there for this. And then for the third digit, I cannot use the first digit, the second digit, and the last digit, right? So therefore, out of the 10, I have 7 choices here. So now I say that, okay, there is 8 into 8 into 7 into 5, right? 8 into 8 into 7 into 5 possible numbers with this property. Now, you might have noticed that I counted it in a very special order, right? Like I counted the numbers for the last digit first, then I counted the numbers for the first digit, then I counted for the second and third digits. Now, question is that can we do it in another order? And of course, you may be able to do it in another order, but again, you have to be very, very careful. Suppose we did in the other order, okay? Suppose we started with the order that as follows, right? So I start with, let's saying that, okay, I'm going to look at 4 digit numbers. I have these 4 possible positions. The first position can be any of the numbers 1 to 9 because it cannot be 0. So I have 9 choices here, right? Then the second position, it can be 0, right? But it cannot be, it cannot be the number that I chose the first. So there is again 9 choices for this. And for the third position, I have to avoid these two guys. So therefore, I have 8 choices here. Now, when it comes to the last position, what you will say, right? So you have to say that, okay, I have the possible numbers like 1 to 5, right? 1, 3, 5, etc. 9. And out of this, I want to avoid the numbers that has appeared before. But the trouble is that we don't know whether how many odd numbers appeared here or how many even numbers appeared here, right? I mean, if the first 2 digits were 1 and 7, then I cannot use 1 and 7 here, right? But on the other hand, uh, if it was like 2, 4, and 6 that we are using, then I can use any of the 5 numbers. So I don't know exactly how many possibilities I have for the last choice. This is because the number of available decisions is not independent of the previous decisions, right? So we need to keep the independence, and for that we might have to choose a particular order of computation. So we computed in this order, right? We started with the last position. Then we said that okay, so I already chose the most restricted one, right? It must be odd, and then I went to the second position, right? I the first position here because it cannot be zero, right? And it must be distinct from this. And then again, I know that all the things are available or possible here, but except for the two which are used here, so I can freely choose. So processing in a different order may not give the independence always. So therefore, we have to be careful in deciding which order we are going to choose, so that the choices, right, at the time we make are independent of the previous. I mean, the number of choices are independent of the previous choice. Okay. We are looking at anagrams. So, anagrams are basically permutations, basically words. So, given a word, you can permute, the letters of the word in whichever way you want, then to find out different other words, right? They need not make any sense, but they can be, just words, not a word in the particular language, but they are words made from, basically strings made from permuting the letters. So, how many words can be obtained by permuting the letters of the word LOCK, lock? Okay, this is easy because as we have already seen, we have four letters here, L, O, C, and K, and we are allowed to use only these four letters. The four letters can be ordered in any of the possible ways, right? So we are looking at permutations, right, for anagrams. So there are four different letters, and how many permutations are there? 4 factorial, right? N factorial permutations. We already saw that. So we can immediately say that okay, there are 4 factorial, which is equal to 24 different words we can make. So maybe as an exercise, try to write down the 24 different permutations of LOCK and make sure that there are exactly 24 of them. Okay. Now I ask, okay, what about LOOK, right, instead of LOCK? Can you use the same argument? Or why cannot use the why we cannot use the product rule to find out the same thing, right? So how do we use product rule here? Well, out of LOCK, the first position can have all the 4 possible choices, right? The second position, once you chose the first one, cannot be used in the second. Therefore, I have 3 choices, then 2 choices, and 1 choice. So why it cannot be used to solve this in this case, right? LO, okay. So think about this. Okay, think about this and find out why we cannot use this and why we could use in the previous thing. Okay, so we will stop this lecture at this time, then continue the next lecture. Okay.